Welcome back to the 10th Regiment YouTube channel. We're talking today from the workshop where all the muskets get fixed. Got a lock here I'm working on.
Let's take a pause. This is Lieutenant Colonel Paul O'Shaughnessy, a name that needs no introduction in Rev War reenacting. If you're in the Northeast, you've likely felt the impact of his 50-plus years of service. In the 10th, he holds an almost mythical status, serving the longest tenure as commanding officer. From 1997 to 2014, he embodied servant leadership, holding the position for 19 years, surpassing even our founder, Vincent Kehoe, who served a decade. Paul took command as the hobby braced for the 225th anniversaries. Reenacting at that time was changing. The internet connected units like never before, and the focus on material culture we see today was in its infancy. For many bicentennial era reenactors, these were going to be their last days on the field, including Vin Kehoe himself, who came out of retirement one final time in 2000 to serve with the 10th in uniform. That year's Battle Road was one of the largest reenactments ever, drawing participants from across the United States and the globe. Paul was not only key to its organization, but also commanded the British forces. Now, 25 years later, as we approach the 250th, only 6 of our current 80 members can say they fielded on that day. For me, it's personal. My dad, newly experienced in fatherhood, brought my brother and I to this event before we even had our first birthdays. I screamed the whole time, but clearly it didn't scar me, as 25 years later, I've spent almost half my life in the 10th. Over the years, I've hunted for lost footage from that day, an event with hundreds of thousands of spectators and extensive media coverage, yet surprisingly little surviving material. That changed when I received 3 hours of rare footage from reenactors from the Midwest and the West Coast. In the video series to come, we are excited to share this footage with you, with Paul providing his expertise on the event. Today, you will learn about the behind the scenes of the event, the immense logistical challenges that Paul faced while organizing the event, while seeing short video clips of the battles that you will see in full in the videos to come. Enjoy this rare treat as we stand on the edge of the 250th. Now back to the video.
And hopefully get it to spark very nicely, which it already is. My name is Paul O'Shaughnessy. I'm colonel in the regiment, former commanding officer. And we're here to talk today about the 225th anniversary Battle of Lexington and Concord, or reenactment of the Battle of Lexington and Concord, known at the time as Battle Road 2000, or BR2K in abbreviation. Battle Road 2000 was the 225th anniversary reenactment of the Battle of Lexington and Concord. It involved the battle in Lexington Green, events up at the bridge, and then a reenactment, although we didn't use the word at the time, of the retreat down through the national park, then all the way through Lexington Center, stopping at Monroe Tavern for about a half hour, and then finishing at Tower Park in the eastern part of Lexington. It took about 12 hours to get everything in, and everyone was pretty tired at the end of the day. There were estimates around 100,000 people in the town, and this is including probably Lexington and Concord, but I heard numbers on the order of 100,000, possibly more, somewhere in that neighborhood. There were, of course, it felt like there were thousands of militiamen, and I think there could have been. There probably were well over 1,000 militia that were involved. And I would estimate, I think it was probably around 1,500, maybe as many as 2,000.
How many regulars did you say there were?
600.
Awesome. So what was your role in terms of planning for BR2K?
I was the British commander, and so I represented essentially the British side of things. I had help from my adjutant, Dick Amsterdam, a number of the officers on the day, sergeants, John Lang and others. But we worked very closely with Skip Hayward of the Lexington Historical Society and the Lexington Minutemen and several others. So my role was basically to get the word out and get the orders out to all of the British units that were attending. And I recall there were something like 24 British regiments that actually ended up appearing on the day. The Battle Road event, what we call BR2K or Battle Road 2000, divided up into, first of all, an encampment on what are now the playing grounds on Lincoln Street in Lexington. Then about 5 a.m. marching out to a point out of sight where we could pick up Massachusetts Avenue, and then marching up Massachusetts Avenue. And this is, at this point, about 600 British soldiers. We then went through the scenario on Lexington Green. Then everybody marched across the green, marched up in the direction of Concord on Massachusetts Avenue, got into army trucks, deuce and a halfs, at Hastings Park, where the gazebo is today, and then drove up to near Concord Center, where they dropped us off and we marched into Concord Center. We then split a bit. Group went out to the North Bridge and had a ceremony out there. And then the entire column marched down the rail cut that exists and crossed through a cemetery, then came out onto the conservation land that is on Old Bedford Road. And then from there, we had a large event right there. We then moved into the park where we did several scenarios, particularly along what was at the time called Bloody Angles stretch near Hartwell Tavern and the Smith House. We then did the same in the section of the park that's down by the Visitor Center, and whereas we now know is the area of Parker's Revenge. And then from there hopped again onto some trucks that dropped us at the top of what is called Concord Hill. This is in Lexington. It's the hill that's very close to Hastings Park. And then had a fighting scenario all the way through the middle of the Lexington Center, right? With people on either side. It was rather wild. Ending at Monroe Tavern, and we were rescued by a contingent that we had sent on ahead coming back up the road representing Earl Percy and his column. Everyone then very authentically threw themselves on the ground at Monroe Tavern because we were all exhausted. And then we picked ourselves back up again and fought through Tower Park alongside Massachusetts Avenue in Lexington. That ended the day. We got back on the magical trucks and got taken back to the Lincoln Street campment. Yeah.
Awesome, sir. So just rewinding back, what were the initial goals for the 225th, and how did you approach the planning process?
So we wanted to try to create as authentic an event, actually capture the fullness of it, the whole thing in its incredible detail. And we realized early on that if we built this up and invited people early on and got them involved, that we could in fact replicate a number of the numbers of the day in the events. And we actually did achieve that pretty well. So what we did is, starting in, I would say, 2, 3 to 4 years ahead of time, we started bulking up and inviting more and more units to the Battle Road events in 1997, 8, 99. We tried out a number of these logistics, and we started discovering things, for example, that there were also school buses taking people all over the place, and we realized that it was a very good idea to put somebody on each school bus that knew where the school bus was absolutely supposed to go and when, and so that the drivers could then concentrate on just driving. The Army, we got them involved. It was actually the National Guard. They did this as an exercise. They actually had this as a real exercise of transporting troops around, and it worked. So they had their radios and all their modern stuff to do that correctly. We had people, again, this is 2000, so there are cell phones and such, but a lot of it was done by walkie-talkies. So we just started working on all of these logistics. That was the big thing. The scenarios took care of themselves, although we worked on that also. We were essentially working these scenarios each and every year. One of the odd things that happened was that in the middle of this, Massachusetts passed an updated gun law, an omnibus gun law, and they forgot to exempt our muskets from the law. So suddenly everybody had, a class whatever military weapon, which it is, but from the wrong era. And that caused a kerfuffle, which we got solved and actually is now embodied as an act of, I think, of 1998 of Mass General Laws. So we got that solved. And we also, the biggest thing is the internet was still relatively new. And we were able, this was the first really big event we were able to run through websites and emails and bulletin boards or Yahoo groups, okay, at the time. And so we had a Battle Road Yahoo group where you could just go and see everything. We had emails for everybody. So as details came up or as updates occurred, we were able to just send it all out. And I still have the final orders, like 4 pages of updates, where to go, where to, schedules and everything, which was sent out completely by email to everybody. With all of that, we were able to put it together. I'm not sure we could have done it through snail mail. I think the biggest logistical challenge, there were two logistical challenges. The first one was transport, just getting people to the right place at the right time and keeping up with the schedule of the day. The second was command and control in the moment. And you realize just how short a distance your voice carries. And so what we did there was we delegated to a number of adjutants and ADCs and such, secondary officers, to get the word around. I also had people on horseback. I don't ride myself, but I had people on horseback like Bob Allegretto. So if something was happening down at the back of the column, Bob could ride up. I could say, Bob, I need you to, go tell them to do this. And he would ride off, and, a minute later, I could see it happening. I got a huge appreciation for the logistical challenges of running an army or running a battle or anything in the 18th century when your modes of communication were voice, whistle, drum, horseback, messenger, things of that nature. We were reduced to that. For an emergency, we had those radios, and we did have, we did use them a few times, but mostly we were running things in the 18th century style.
So what were the most exciting moments for you?
Well, certainly coming out and marching onto Lexington Green with that number of people. We filled the green. And we didn't have all 600 on the green. That was quite something. And the event itself had been talked up and promoted quite liberally in the public, and there were newspaper articles and all kinds of things. So the feeling of the crowd around was just electric. It was amazing. And I think that the one of the things that sticks in my mind is that I glanced back as we were marching onto Lexington Green. I glanced back down Massachusetts Avenue. It was filled. I mean, all the way down to the post office and beyond was just a sea of red coats. Who gets to see that? It was amazing. And the crowd that was there just sort of disappeared and melted away in your mind, and you just felt that you were actually in the moment. Accepting it being a Saturday instead of, I think it was a Wednesday, was the original day. Everything was very much the same. The time of day, the phase, I looked it up, the phase of the moon was the same, the weather was the same, the temperatures went up just about the same during the day as had been recorded there, and there was just this sense that we were starting off a series of 225th events. And I remember I brought a small bottle of whiskey, and everybody just had a tiny sip. But we all passed it around about 4 a.m. when we all get up for officer's call. And I just said, gentlemen, tonight and this morning it begins. And you could just feel a wave go through everybody, and they all just went, oh wow,
All right, sir. Looking back on the 2000 event, what lessons did you learn that you think will be helpful for the upcoming 250th anniversary in 2025?
Well, I think that leadership is absolutely paramount. Leadership and cooperation. One of the things that made this happen was that a lot of people early on just said, this is going to happen. We're going to work together. We're going to make this happen. We're going to overcome obstacles and get people's cooperation. So we were able to pull in, as I said, the National Guard, obviously the police, Massachusetts emergency response. They had a field hospital they set up just in case, you have 100,000 people, somebody could have a heart attack. Right? I don't think they had any big problems, but there were some twisted ankles and things of that nature. And the cooperation of the state of Massachusetts, the towns, the police forces, the National Park Service, and the various town committees was just superlative. And there were very few arguments and very few contests about who was supposed to do what, when, and how. People just got it done. We also had a sense in the British Army, the reenacted British Army at the time, of a chain of command and just paying attention to it. And I just remember many of these people had no idea who I was, or maybe they did, but they hadn't really met me. But they arrived on the scene, and it was, "Sir, where would you like us?" Done. It's like it's like a world that's lost to us now.
Yeah.
So that was just that level of cooperation that really made it work. I think the 250th coming up is going to be quite astounding. I think that the visuals that are going to occur are going to be superlative. The material culture has advanced. It was good in Battle Road 2000, and people did their very best at the time, but it has substantially improved in the 25 years since. And so the visuals that people are going to have are going to be really quite tremendous. It's going to be a smaller event than Battle Road 2000, which is not necessarily a bad thing. That was a bit unwieldy. But this is going to be one of the biggest events in recent reenacting history, and I think it will itself kick off, I'm hoping, a series of 250th events, just as the 225th did.